that's right, that's what.
Now we're ready.
I'm saying. Yeah.
All right, now we're ready.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Donnie Osmond. I'm the town moderator. Welcome to the informal informational meeting this evening. We will go through the agenda of the town meeting, and if there are questions and comments, then we'll entertain all those. So the warning starts on your town report page 111. Articles 1 and 2 are voted on by Australian ballot, so we don't have to discuss those. Article 3 is to hear all the town reports and act on the same. At the town meeting, I will go through each individual report, but for tonight, I will ask, are there any questions about any of the town reports that anybody has? Okay, I'm going to take that as a negative. Article 4, shall the town vote to raise appropriate and expend the sum of $6,833.06 for support of Rural Community Transportation Incorporated to provide services to the residents of the town of Plainfield? Questions, comments on Article 4? We're going to have a fast meeting, folks.
Don't say that. You just changed it.
I'm just jumping the gun. Article 5, shall the town of Plainfield appropriate the sum of $1,499 to Green Mountain Transit as its share of the 2025 year cost of commuter bus service along Route 2 with service into Montpelier? This appropriation funds a portion of the total cost of service, which will also be supported by appropriations from other towns, state, and federal funds and passenger fares. Questions, comments on Article 5?
I have one comment. This is a reduction from the amount that they asked for last year. And I was just looking through the minutes here. It's a very, very small amount. It was pennies. It was 94 cents. It was $1,499.94.
Well, we could take that to the bank.
We can take that to the bank, yes. And I asked them about it and they said, yeah, we just rounded down. So that was what they requested.
Is the service maintained the same?
Yes.
Sorry, we're gonna need a name. And you have to use the mic if you're asking questions from the audience.
Stephen Farnham, I just want to know if the service is the same number of routes, same
Yes.
number of arrivals, departures.
Yeah. There is some discussion I saw in the media of mergers between some of the public transit folks who swapping, but it does not affect the financing.
Anybody else on Article 5? Moving on to Article 6. Shall the town voters authorize the expenditures for the following not-for-profit service agencies as recommended by the appointed Social Concerns Committee? Capstone Action, 500. Central Vermont Basic Education, 400. Central Vermont Council on Aging, 1,300. Central Vermont Home Health and Hospice, 3,100. Circle, 525. Elevate Youth Services, 500. Good Samaritan, Family Center of Washington County, 1,000. I'm sorry if I got this wrong.
No,
I'm sorry. Family Center of Washington County is 500. I misstated that. I need to do this. Good Samaritan Haven, 1,000. Neighbors in Action, 250. Onion River Food Shelf, 1,000. Our House, $150. People's Health and Wellness Clinic, $750. Twin Valley Senior Center, $4,500. Twin Field Together Mentoring Program, $250. Vermont Center for Independent Living, $175, for a grand total of $14,950. Questions, comments on any of the appropriations on Article 6 for the Social Concerns Committee? Okay. Moving on to Article 7. Shall the town authorize an appropriation of $54,000 to the Cutler Memorial Library to pay for the librarian, a library assistant, and the purchase of materials and services, including those to make the library accessible to the community? Questions, statements on Article 7? Article 8. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Recreation and Public Arts Project Reserve Fund for the purpose of building reserves to cover larger projects, including matching funds for grants to be initially funded by $2,500 from the general fund in accordance with 24 VCA, I think that's subsection 2804. Questions, comments, Article 8?
Just a comment. You'll see that reference to 24 VSA subsection 2804. All that basically is boilerplate language from the statute that says the reserve fund shall only be used for this purpose unless the voters at a duly warned meeting change the purpose. So,
Okay,
so the select board does not have the authority to go and take that and use it for something
I
else,
see.
for example.
well, that'd be
It's just
important to
standard
tell
language.
folks.
And the reason for the fund, I should add, is to ensure that whatever money goes in there can be carried over year to year and not have to restart it.
Okay. Moving on, Article 9. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Disaster Reserve Fund for the purpose of providing readily available cash in emergencies for immediate response, including matching funds for grants to be initially funded by $10,000 from the general fund in accordance with 24 VCA subsection 2804.
The amount of the fund again? What was the amount of the fund again?
10,000. Article 10. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Sidewalk and Pedestrian Reserve Fund for the purpose of funding sidewalk and other pedestrian infrastructure, including matching funds for grants, to be initially funded by $500 from the general fund in accordance with 24 VCA subsection 2804. Questions on Article 10? Okay. Article 11. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Bridges Reserve Fund for the purpose of funding bridge construction and maintenance, including matching funds for grants to be initially funded by $5,000 from the general fund in accordance with 24 VCA subsection 2804. Comments? Questions on Article 11? Article 12. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Culverts Reserve Fund for the purpose of funding culvert construction and maintenance, including matching funds for grants to be initially funded by $10,000 from the general fund in accordance with 24 VCA subsection 2804. Stephen.
And just a little clarity on why we're establishing these funds. It's just to set money aside so when the bridges blow up and the culverts get washed out, we have money to fix them.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea was that right now, as if we, as a select board to say this, we're spending this money this year. If the money doesn't get spent in that year, then it reverts back. This gives them actual funding that they can build on year to year. And that way, when we have bigger projects, we need to do matching funds. There's funds there that don't expire on June 30th.
These funds all came, and the dollar amount recommended by Josh Pitts, our treasurer, and also road commissioner, as what he described as assets management. It's sort of a step between year-to-year appropriations and a capital budget, which we do not have. And so this is a step in that direction of managing those assets. And it does allow it to build up, and also allows in the disaster fund for immediate response.
Like self-insurance.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on Peter's comments, I got a call from 7 Days, and Plainfield has the honor of being the town with the most reserve funds being established. And the reason for that is just as Peter spoke to, it's about having a budget process that's more mature and will hopefully save the taxpayer money, so we're not running out and asking for a big hit.
And I just want to say also, part of the reason is if there are grants, which we're very heavily working on right now, that grant money, if it's designed for a certain need, will go into that fund, and it can't be used for anything else. So that's one of the reasons too.
I wonder if it'd be helpful at the meeting, just to, before we go into any of these, just to talk about the reserve funds in general, what they're doing as a as a tool, as a budgetary
It's
tool.
a tool. Yes, you or Josh could probably speak to that.
Okay, that's great.
Yes, good idea.
Okay, we're gonna move on to, any more questions about the culverts reserve fund or reserve funds before we move on to Article 13? Article 13. Shall the town establish a reserve fund to be called the Village Expansion Reserve Fund for the purpose of expanding the east side of the village by acquiring land and making municipal infrastructure improvements in accordance with 24 VCA 2804. Questions and comments on this one?
The amount?
There is no amount.
It is just to create the fund itself. This is, I think, this way, if we do get money in some other ways, we have somewhere to put it. But we also wanted to get an indication from the town that this was a project that the town residents, citizens wanted us to move forward in. And so this is like a proxy vote before we get farther along with, needs. There might be other needs, bond votes, other things. Before we get to that, this is just the vote to allow folks to let us know what they're thinking about this project as well. And there is a hand up on the screen.
Go ahead, you got someone, you got
Alicia Weiss.
two of them.
Yep.
So let's.
Yeah, Alicia, can I recognize people here?
Yeah.
Alicia
Yes.
Weiss?
Okay, thanks, Donnie. So just to be clear, this is not binding in terms of action on the project or our specific actions on the project itself. There would need to be, as I understand it, select board approval on, aside from the DRB, larger DRB process, there would need to be select board approval for it to go forward, and likely voter approval for various portions. So this is expressing interest. The one thing questions I've been hearing is, well, I like some aspects that I'm not so sure about the timeline or the extent of it. We're not voting on that right now, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to
Peter
clarify.
Youngberg?
If I might, Alicia, I wanted to caution you in the use of the word binding here, because this is a binding vote. This was language suggested by the League of Cities and Towns to not have an advisory opinion, which they advised against, but to have an action which is binding. The creation of the fund is binding. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything further than that. But in fact, it is a legal vote that creates a fund, so that is binding.
Yeah, I didn't use it specifically enough. It was more about to what it binds us. It binds us to have the fun, and that is it, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Others? Bram?
No, I can add to John. I can speak loud enough.
Well, it's
Yeah, it's just for the recording.
Just to clarify, it's
Name?
Doug Weinrich. Just to clarify, it's to establish the fund, it's not, are you in favor or are you not in favor of the plan, correct?
Correct.
That should be clear because that's been floating around out in social media land, so you're aware.
Shows you how much you can
Wow.
trust social
Wow.
media.
we were just showing something on social media at our last meeting about actions we took on immigration as a board that never happened and was totally fictitious. So, social media is not the best place to get, all the accurate information.
What they're on social media, they're saying.
Yeah.
Just so you can.
Other questions, comments? Okay, we're gonna move on. Article 13. Oops, excuse me, Article 14. Shall the town approve $291,666 for the operation of the water department for the period of July 1st, 2025 to June 30, 2026, to be paid for by the ratepayers of the system? Questions, comments on Article 14? Paula?
Paula
Paula.
Emery speaking. Yeah.
Gotta do the mic. Informational meeting, yeah.
Paula Emery. Can you tell us what type, is that a flat level fund? Is it gone up? I'm curious about whether that, because I'm a ratepayer on that system, and I know that we lost a vast amount of the use of the system and payment for the system, does this reflect any changes post flood?
I think, Josh and Carol will be aghast that I'm speaking about something to do with water and sewer. To the best of my knowledge, I understand we have suffered a huge loss in terms of numbers of people on the system. And we have, pursued grant efforts. I can't speak specifically to how that number compares to last year, but I will say that we're taking extraordinary measures to ensure that the system remains whole. We're very well aware of the losses of hookups and so forth.
Peter?
Just in terms of, last year, we approved 282,865. So this is going to 291,666.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the water.
Other
We have another-
questions?
We have one.
Yep.
Alicia again up on the.
Alicia?
Yeah, this is a general question, cued by the last question. What is the most expedient and accurate way for residents to get, comparison figures between last year and the amounts that are being requested this year for those funds and appropriations that did exist last year?
Your town report.
Okay.
And they're both the current one and previous ones are all posted on the Plainfield, Vermont website.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have them somewhere, but I don't know where, so that's very convenient.
Okay, we're still on Article 14. Moving on to Article 15. Shall the town approve $363,985 for the operation of the wastewater department for the period of July 1st, 2025 to June 30, 2026, to be paid for by the ratepayers of the system? Questions, comments? Article 15.
We have a question.
Peter?
Reading Paula's mind.
Yeah.
What I really meant to say?
This is down, 30,000, 60,000 from last year, from,
That's
excuse me, 30,000, from 397 to 363.
Part of this is because of grants that were secured
Yeah.
and recovery from the feds in the state. So that's what we're trying to do across the board.
So it's gone down slightly this year, but one living in the system might expect that maybe the following year then you might see some changes. Is that, I'm just guessing.
We don't know.
We don't know
We
with,
have Goddard College sitting there who is a big.
They have a
user.
lot of toilets.
So it's just too hard to know right now.
Okay. I think I'm trying to say, like, thinking about projecting out with the loss of the bits, you know, 1/3 of the village, that the cost per, you know, for the other people on the system I'm surprised they didn't go up this year. I would anticipate then that they will go up in the future just to keep that system going.
Yep.
You have
Okay,
another hand.
Michael? Billingsley too?
I just want to add that of all the buyout property, at least half of the people are still living in their houses. In other words, he used the figures of houses that are potentially going to be bought out, doesn't really reflect sewer and water use.
Okay, we're still on Article 15. Now we shall move on to Article 16. Shall the town approve total fund expenditures of $1,666,863.44 to pay for administrative operations, fire and rescue department, and highway department of the town of Plainfield for the period of July 1st, 2025 to June 30, 2026, of which $1,354,413.44 shall be raised by taxes and $306,450 by non-tax revenue. Questions, comments on Article 16?
What's the non-tax portion?
What's the, I didn't hear you.
He just asked, what's the non-tax portion?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So we get revenues from the states, from grants, from other sources that aren't taxes from the citizens of Plainfield. So that is a very conservative estimate on how much we expect to get in from those sources. So of the 1.6 and change budget, we expect $300,000 to come in from those sources. And again, that's a conservative estimate of our town treasurer of what he expects based on previous years and also what we've, been in discussion about. So in previous years, I think we've always just either put the 1.3 number on the ballot or the 1.6. It's been less clear. Peter has led an effort for us to have both numbers on the ballot so folks understand that the total budget is 1.6, but that the amount being raised by taxes by us is the 1.3 and change.
And if you look at your page 49 of the town report is the revenue page, so you can see the state aid to town highways, dog license fees, grants.
They haven't sent me my report yet, but anyway, so you're saying it's a conservative estimate, it might be more than that, it's unlikely to be less. And what I'd like to know is this, the 1.3 that you're raising from taxes, is that just kind of the normal amount plus increase in cost, or is there some amount in there to cover all of the repairs to the roads that had to be done this year?
I think it's an increase of 2.8% from last year.
So
That's raised by tax.
less than cost of living and less than inflation for sure.
Right.
But it is a small increase. We tried our very best to try to make it a 0%. But it was that was never going to work based on like costs of things going up and the needs, but we worked very hard. The town treasurer worked very hard on that.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Moving right along. Article 17. Shall the town of Plainfield authorize the select board to apply any surplus from the current fiscal year to reduce taxes in the next fiscal year?
And just to explain that, when we hit the end of June, we see how much money is left over, unspent money. If it's not in a reserve fund, that unspent money can now be paid to pay down next year's taxes. And so before anyone gets their tax bills, that money is applied to that 1.3 million and change, hopefully bringing it down. We don't have a specific number, but with the cycle of getting flood money back and things, that could be a relatively large number, like tens of thousands or more, that would then buy down the amount that we'd have to raise in taxes, lowering the town's tax rate.
Any other questions? Article 17. Article 18. Shall the town vote to accept the provisions of public statutes relating to the collection of shall the town vote to accept the provisions of public statutes relating to the collection of taxes by the town treasurer, VSA 32, section 4791, and vote to collect municipal taxes 30 days from mailing and not prior to August 13th, 2025, and collect school taxes on November 19, 2025, and February 11, 2026, collecting half of the school's total taxes on each of those dates. Questions and comments? Article 18. Okay. Article 19, to transact any other non-binding business that may properly come before the meeting. Anybody have any non-binding business that will properly come before the meeting?
We talked about on Tuesday, but we're gonna talk to me.
Well said.
If it's non-binding, what's the point of the article?
Betsy, you want to come take the
Yeah,
microphone?
but the question was, if it's non-bounding, what's the part of the article? It just gives us space within the, if we didn't have that article, it would not give us space to have, if folks wanted to have, I don't know, a proposal to support a certain thing or be against a certain thing. We sometimes see those at town meeting. Those happen in this space. If we didn't make the article, there would be no space for them in the meeting.
Just kind of like other.
Others, yeah, other business, yeah, but it just creates a space in the agenda.
Betsy, use your hand up.
To say something on Article 13. but
Well,
I-
go ahead.
Okay.
We're not going to stand on
Yeah.
ceremony.
Identify yourself also.
Yes, I'm Betsy Ziegler. I'm here just as the select board requested concerning the village expansion. Has the select board requested a judicial opinion from the District 5 Act 250 board? And then my question is, why not?
Hasn't gotten that far
Yeah, we
yet.
haven't gotten that far. The only request we've made is to the Ethics Commission concerning if the town would be able to buy the property, since one of the sellers is the town clerk. We haven't taken any other, and we've also taken to have a real estate attorney on hand if we can negotiate, so we can know the price, so we can know the full sale price. We haven't asked for any of that because we haven't heard from the town yet that they want us to work on this.
I think that the town needs your guidance as our select board, who know a lot, but we as a town and you as a select board and the committee are not developers. We are trying to do a large development here. And we need all the wisdom and the knowledge that's available to us to make a good choice. Do we want to go forward with this and borrow this money or not? And that, we are basing our decision on not quite enough information. And I feel it is important for you to do due diligence, to look at all this information that is available. And Act 250 is a way, it's a landmark resource, landmark program. Let's figure out let's ask them for some support and to get some guidance. Thank you.
And I'll just remind folks that the item that's on this ballot is, there's no money attached to it, and it's just the bucket. I'll just say for me personally, I mean, I've had conversations about Act 250. I work for Vermont Conservation Voters. One of my coworkers is former head counsel for the Agency of Natural Resources, former chair of the Natural Resource Board, who made Act 250 determination. So I've had some conversations with them about whether it could be done or not. And he seemed more positive than Michael Zahner did. And Michael's got a long background as well. And they're probably both equally as experienced and have differing opinions as to whether Act 250 could happen or not.
Knowing that Michael Zahner doesn't feel says that we need to have an Act 250 permit. We will not qualify for an exemption even if we do have whatever is called a development area,
Neighborhood development area.
neighborhood development area, thank you. Because we are, we're doing subdivision, we're not doing a development, we're doing a subdivision. And two, because we're subdividing each one of those properties, we're selling to an individual, lots of legal fees there. And so we are just subdividing, and we will be, the new law that does exempt subdivisions in large growth areas does not apply to Vermont, doesn't apply to Plainfield. We're not a large area. We're not, those apply to cities like Burlington, whatever, Winooski, Rutland. And that law that portion of the law goes into effect in 2026. So.
Hey, Michael, Peter, Stephen.
I want to say in a very preliminary way that there are quite a few steps involving public information ahead of us that are required of us. In other words, there are public interactions that are required. And in a conversation I had yesterday, tried to see all the different steps where the public would interact, would appeal, would ask for clarification, could weigh in and provide background information. There are 7 at least steps, discrete steps required by law, where the development of any ideas with relating to this particular neighborhood would be open for public response. And the last thing I could see there was that there was any kind of opacity. It's a very transparent process, which is partly required by law and partly made clear by the group itself that was working on it. So I think that the great many things that people would want to ask and the great many ways that people would want to weigh in, that process hasn't even really started to roll until more decisions are made on the town level. So I don't think we're going to find ourselves lacking information or lacking an opportunity to weigh in and make comments and yes or no, comments.
It was Peter and then Stephen, then.
Yeah, I wanted
Betsy
to
again.
reply in part to Betsy's comment about due diligence and judicial opinion. You can ask for a judicial opinion, but that is different than a ruling on a specific case that would come before the commission. And I need to do further research on that as part of doing the due diligence. And I say that to be blunt and crass about it. We could get a judicial opinion and we may end up with a different result actually going through the process. And so I'm not sure that the benefit of a JO at this time would be particularly helpful. I personally agree with you and Mike Zahner on the subdivision and the tier 1 stuff and what is or isn't. And I know that lots of people have been talking about that at this point, but until we get to that point, and that's why we're going through the Ethics Commission due process to say step by step, can we take the next step? Okay, if we can take the next step, then let's go there, but we're not there yet.
Stephen, I think you were next.
So is this on?
Yeah, I might have to slide where it's up the mic where it's red right now. You might slide it to green.
Let's try that again. There we go. I was of the impression there was going to be something on the warning this year. Voting to authorize this project to go forward or not, voting on whether the town was going to become a developer or not, and so forth. And as far as I can see, what I heard tonight, the only article, which I think someone said is number 13, is just simply to create a reserve fund with $0 in it. So am I correct in my understanding that no action taken on town meeting day either advances or blocks the project? The only purpose of Article 13 is to create a place to put money if the town decides to go forward with it. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I should also add that the grant group is working hard to get money in for a lot of projects, this being one of them. If they could raise $2.5 million and we now have a fund we could stick it in. So we think it's real premature to ask the town for anything right now. The group is still working on the plans. They're still getting permitting procedures done. They're looking at drainage issues. There's a lot of things that this committee, this volunteer group is doing, no cost to us. So I'm fine with them moving ahead and seeing what's gonna come up.
I'm sorry, can I take you and then Betsy and then me if I can?
My name is Sandy Vitztum. I'm helping the steering committee to develop a design for the site. And I wanted to reassure people who are concerned about Act 250 that in the process, as that time comes up, it is actually not an obstacle to the project to go through Act 250. If that ends up being the way the project develops, it will go through. And but I most important is following a logical sequence of decision making. Thank you so much.
Betsy.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond saying, I hear that we will maybe get to Act 250. I'm saying, let's start now. Well, and get as much information as we can from that procedure. And that procedure probably entails filling out a brief, not or somewhat brief application process and talking to the coordinator and getting his opinion. Otherwise, we're moving forward, and we're gonna maybe add more expenses as we see, add more issues or expenses as they come up. But in the meantime, we've invested all this town energy. We have a limited amount of town energy. And, we are investing in something we're not sure yet is affordable for us and doable in that setting. So I'd say, let's get them as much information now so that we don't just continue this discussion for the next 6 months or year. We have other projects to be working on. Revitalizing the village. Why don't we aren't we thinking about a feasibility study of how we can really make use of what is usable in the village? How can we improve upon it? A feasibility study or something to address the possibilities at Goddard. These are things we know exist and are things that we could directly address right now. We have an intersection, of course, that is been a difficulty for the last 40 years since I've been in town. I've been on committees in the last 40 years on how to address it and move forward. Let's do something about it. Let's use this moment to say, this matters to our town to make us a better community, a more functional, a more walkable, user-friendly community. Let's get an intersection that works for people so we can walk to this town hall safely, and you can bring your kids to a dance performance. Thank you.
Oh, I think he said Paula.
I just want, I'm pretty sure, like, point of fact, I am Paula Emery once again, and I'm thinking that we don't have any say over what happens at Goddard. It's privately owned.
Right.
It's not, there's no feasibility study to have there by the town.
The
with
board has
private
been in
developer.
communication with the owner, but that's all we can do.
Right,
Yeah.
our town select board is not gonna make any decision about what happens there or our town population, other than what falls under zoning and,
Yes. Well,
all those other
Yeah,
things.
and they have committed to some community processes, but they haven't laid out what those are. So they will, where they ask for community support as the owners of the property, there will be opportunities, but not through the municipality.
Right, are they bound
They're not bound.
by the
No.
municipality in any way other than zoning?
Other than zoning, no. Go ahead.
Very briefly, because I know Betsy's concern is really important. From the first week that I started helping out with the project back in August, there are 10 criteria as part of Act 250. And they have all been looked at and kind of brought up at the same speed in this logical framework that I've described. We've already gotten the ability to serve letters. That's some of the criteria. We've been working on natural resources, another criteria. Stormwater and erosion control are also criteria that are very important. So all of these things are actually going to start hitting public conversation as part of the development review board review that's starting next month. Thank you again.
So I just, I want to make a quick comment. I won't make any comments, obviously, at town meeting, but being that this is informal, I want to address what you said earlier, Stephen, and ask the select board, because my understanding of this vote is, although you are correct that it doesn't bind either for or against the project, my understanding is that the select board wants to take the temperature of the community. And therefore, the outcome of this vote might well be critical to whether or not this project happens, even though there is no legal binding to it, apparently. I just want to make that clear. So, Peter, were you next? Did you have a hand up? Okay.
Oh, I'll just say that we, as a select board, when we were discussing whether to put the bond onto the ballot or not, decided not to, but then did have a resolution where if the town voted for this reserve fund, if we got all our questions answered about the bond and the financial impact of the bond, if we found out from the ethics commission that we could in fact purchase the property from the town clerk, and there might have been one other stipulation that I'm not thinking of.
There's just some other issues.
That there's a list of things that we said we would then move forward on a bond vote. And obviously it's up to the residents to decide. I will say, sitting on the select board, Betsy, every time we take an action that even is information gathering for the project, we are then accused of supporting the project and helping the project. And every time we don't take an action, then we're being told like we're slowing it down. So it's very hard in the select board position where we are right now, because everything we do is either seen as either helping or hurting, when all we're actually trying to do is get as much information out there for folks. And then also, if there are ways that we as a town, since we have spent $0 as a town on this project, if there are ways that we as a town can help a group in our town, including the village expansion group, get grant funding, we're going to do that. And so we have done some of that where they have found the money, they have applied for the money, it has to go through the town. It's for the specific purpose of the village expansion. So we have been the pass through on that and voted to do that. But even that is being told that this is a fait accompli and that we're pushing it, it's gonna happen no matter what, when all we're trying to do is actually try to help, because that money then went to getting more information about the land so we could have a better feasibility about whether the land could be used, which is what I think you actually want, is a feasibility. Betsy, is this land usable or not? We've been trying to do those kinds of things in different ways. But we then get told that all we're doing is supporting the project without town support, without town resident support. So just so you know how the hard position that we're in.
Stephen.
Thank you. So I heard Michael say earlier this evening that I think you said some folks are waiting on buyouts. Does that mean some have buyouts and some are waiting for them? Or there's more parts of my questions. Let me ask all of it and then you can address them for you. So anyway,
is that germane to this?
Earlier in the year, we had kind of a mass abatement for a number of properties that were affected by the flood. And are these property owners going to be sent a new property tax bill in this year?
Yes.
Or are they, and so maybe they'll be abated again. So my question is, have some accepted buyouts and some are waiting for buyouts, or what's the deal there? And Goddard was, I believe, a tax exempt organization but I believe it's privately owned, it's gonna be taxable now. So what is gonna be the effect, net effect to the town? Is Goddard gonna make up for some of that, part of it, most of it? And if you could speak to how many properties are gonna be quote unquote back on the tax rolls because they haven't taken a buyout.
I'll talk about the Goddard, you go ahead with that.
I just talked about the buyout part. Buyouts are offered, but when they are approved. All of the buyouts that we have been requested to put forward, 3 have been approved. And this includes, those are from 2023, so that they have been approved. They're going forward to the next step, is to get the property appraised. When your property is appraised, then you decide whether the amount that you're going to be offered allows you to find a new home elsewhere. In which case you might decide to stay where you are, even if it's dangerous. So that's the 3 properties already on the list they've already been approved. So they're in the process of being appraised and deciding. The other 27 properties, which represent damage from 2024, are going to be finding out whether they're approved or not in April or May. And that's very likely to happen because of one whole group that's going to be approved as a whole. Of those 27, I know specifically there are people who are not really eager to be bought out. There are people that will be bought out if they think that their house will be damaged again, but if something changes with the book, they might stay. There's some people definitely who are quite afraid they're not going to get enough money in a buyout offer to be able to buy housing in this market and will just be forced to stay where they are. So really, we have to wait till June to know.
As far as Goddard's concerned, there's still a lot of unknowns. Mike Davidson is the owner, and he's an interesting guy. He really wants to do well by the town. But I can tell you, as he's a private venture capitalist in a way, his experience has been to restore housing elsewhere. He pretty much rebuilt White River Junction and brought that community back. So he's not afraid of old buildings, and he's not afraid of creating housing. He is a businessman. He's going to look to minimize his tax burden as much as possible. He has a property that he's going to spend $3.5 million to buy. A lot of money goes into the maintenance, and then the value of it is still unknown. We don't have our appraisals in yet, so we don't know what the value will be and how it'll be taxed. But it's pretty clear from Sandy Ross, our lister, that she she doesn't think it's tax exempt anymore, and that they should be paying and will be paying taxes, but they have to come to a value. So
And those appraisal amounts are going to be out April 1st. Right? And so we will know the appraisal amount, at least that is appraised right now. It is still technically in the owned by Goddard College as an entity, but they don't have the exempt status because they're not an educational institution anymore. And so I believe Mike Davidson by May 1st will have purchased. He put half down and he's putting the other half down before May 1st.
He's not the owner of record yet.
Yeah.
So technically Goddard College is still the owner, but he has put a significant amount of money down, and he's going to close on May 1st. And when he does, that'll be the moment that he's a private enterprise. Paula?
Am I talking out of the way, Paula Emery?
With this week?
I did. If the owner, Mike Davidson, right? If he were to determine that he wanted, all the old buildings, like the Kilpatrick dorm and the Milk House and Haybarn to be a school, then that portion of the campus would actually be tax exempt. Is that correct?
I'm not sure of that.
Oh, okay.
That could very well be something he wants to do, but I believe he would have to transfer a piece of the property that would be in that category and turn it into, it would have to change ownership. And he has not talked about wanting to do that. So if he's, let's say, renting to a school, it's still a private property. So that's why it's hard to answer any questions about how much money can come in. It's going to be more than it's been. We can say that.
More than it's been.
Anybody else? This is an informal oh, I'm sorry, absolutely.
Doug Weinrich again. Just had a question. Francis had written on Front Porch Forum about the ongoing village project, and it was about that the town is not going to be on the hook if they go for $2.5 million bond because the land is going to be collateral. I kind of couldn't wrap my head around that one. Can you explain what he meant there? Or can he explain what he meant there?
Yeah, well, the idea, as I understand,
Did he speak for himself?
That-
is where is, oh, there you, oh, there. Go ahead, Francis.
Hey, yeah, for the record, she, her pronouns, thank you. I heard that at the village expansion information session. The second session held at the Opera House, I think it was on the 12th. It was late in the discussion. We ended up talking about that piece for about 15 minutes. That was what I heard. I'm afraid I can't go deeper than that. I don't know what conversations were had to have that point be made and spoken. But I do remember there being a business person in the audience who, after hearing the details, was so confident in his statement that this is a great deal. And I simply am raising that and bringing that back, not because I know that, not because I can guarantee that, but because this is part of the information pool that is out there in the world right now that hasn't been remembered publicly by anyone but me, as far as I can tell or have read. So I was bringing that comment back into the spotlight, in the hopes truly that it could be kind of illuminated or disambiguated about what is the story there. Does that indeed relieve the town from the burden of the loan? Like if the town did not pay back the loan, if it went to the Vermont Communities Foundation, you know, I have any trust in the Vermont Communities Foundation to do something decent and reasonable. But, you know, again, this is speculation because we don't really know. And so I'm going to pass it over to Peter, who I saw just raise their hand.
Yes, I did respond to Francis online when I saw that post as well, because that kind of jumped out at me. And it goes into the greater question of what was originally presented to the select board, which was a bond for $2.5 million. And there are various bonding questions that still need to be addressed, including putting it out for bids, which seems to be required by state law, if nothing else. And also how then your town taxes are structured each year when you put your budget together, despite the conditions of any loan or bond that you have. So there are some minute details that have to be done there. What Francis was referring to there was like, okay, if we, take this loan out, but we can't pay it off because we didn't sell enough lots, it would all revert to the community foundation. I love the community foundation. I give to the community foundation. I've used them. I think they're a great organization. But for the town of Plainfield, any money that we would have spent selling these lots and taking in, we would lose. And it would all go to the community foundation. If I understood that correctly, and I can't say that I have, but that's the way I read that information. And I would be concerned about that.
When you say it goes to the community foundation, does that mean they're like holding a mortgage on it or something like that? So it goes to them and they liquidate it and we get whatever's left over?
Well,
or
again,
what does that mean?
Again, Francis was remembering this from the second info session, okay? And I wasn't at the second info session. I happened to work that day. I went to listen to the first one on Zoom. But the assumption here is that we're getting a loan, but that's an assumption. That is not a fact yet. That has to go to the voters before it even becomes whether it's a loan or a bond. Okay, and a loan is a bond under state statute. Okay, and what are the conditions? There are no conditions. There's no contract. There's no nothing yet. So, this is speculation. But if in the information that's out there, that if this is what's being talked about, then I would be concerned. If after all of this effort, it would revert if we didn't sell enough to pay for it.
Sandy?
I've been listening to the conversations about the loans and I'd be happy, I don't think Arian's on the call, so, oh, he is, but I'll speak unless he wants to speak up. The community, Vermont Community Foundation has been a great supporter of this, experiment to see how it works. If a municipality pursues creating, lots. So they have been generous enough to outright donate the money for the initial engineering services, $35,000. And they have just agreed to offer an unsecured loan for the next phase of engineering services. So the Plainfield theoretically is not on the hook if the project does not go forward. That makes a very big difference. So that Plainfield's not getting in the situation of kind of getting ahead of itself financially. So in the scenario that I've been envisioning, there will come a day when the exact cost of the project's known after it's bid and the exact revenue for lots is known. And I believe that the town doesn't need to just choose to exercise a right that it may take to purchase land until that day. My hope for the town is that the town is under no obligation until, except for the agreement of this unsecured loan, until the day that it's very apparent that it makes sense financially to do it, and then the town would make this decision. The next loan, which would be for the construction cost, has not been discussed to my knowledge in detail yet, because we're not there yet. And my sense is that the Vermont law now allows any entity to sell lots and use those proceeds towards the cost of the project. So if it were, it would be less than 2.5 because we've already expended almost 200, but let's say it's 2.3 million, this very last loan. It's like a credit, a line of credit. So the town would only draw against that as construction costs increase, minus the revenue coming in from lots. That makes sense.
Mhm.
So and I understand that I'm an optimistic person, sometimes unreasonably so, but when I did a very early cost analysis, I didn't see the net indebtedness going any further than 1.5 million. It could go further. I don't know, but the idea is to have a plan for the entire possible indebtedness in case for some reason you don't sell a single lot. But you would have a very good idea because theoretically you've reserved the lots before the day of choosing to go forward with the project. So theoretically, it's a pretty known scenario. And that's all we can offer right now, because again, we have to proceed through the project in a logical way. And this would be the next round of conversations coming up. But thank you for the time to explain that a little bit more.
Thanks for that explanation.
Stephen?
Mhm.
I guess what I'm trying to wrap my head around here is at some point, whether we float a bond or whatever the terminology is, or in essence, the town's gonna borrow money to move this project forward if the town votes to do so. And I'm trying to think of this in terms that I understand, like an individual or a couple were to buy a piece of property and make some improvements to it, and then ran out of money and had to sell after they put in a foundation and a septic and power, but they couldn't afford to build a house and they had to sell. They still added value to it, so it's worth more than what they paid for it. They'd have to sell, they'd have to pay off the mortgage, if there's anything left over, they get that back. And the question I'm trying to get to the bottom of here is if the town sticks its neck out and goes into this project, and for whatever reason it goes south, we're gonna lose everything, or we're gonna pay off entities to whom the town owes money, and then potentially not lose a lot or get a little bit of something back after those entities are repaid.
Michael?
Michael Billingsley. I'm gonna try and amplify on what Sandy said, which is to not compare this to a home mortgage, but rather to literally compare it to a line of credit. If you have a line of credit, you're offered the opportunity to borrow up to a certain amount. So if in this case, the line of credit is $22.5 million, you're not paying interest on it until you actually borrow some of it. So in this case, if construction costs occur first, 100,000, whatever, 200,000, you borrow that money at the same time you're selling lots. So you might be paying some of it back, even as you're taking some of it out. So the actual balance in the line of credit at any one moment of time is the amount you're paying the 2% interest on, which is what is connected with the offered line of credit. And that means that you may never be on the hook for, if they chose to go forward, if there was a different town vote to go forward, we may never be at any one moment in time on the hook for $2.5 million. We'd be on the hook only for the amount that had actually been expended and it wasn't recovered through lot sales. So it could be a rather small amount of money as we go forward in time, because hopefully because lots are so desirable right now and people need a place to build, we would be pulling back that money in even as we were spending it. A line of credit wouldn't be touched up to its top during time. That's how I understand it. And does that jive with what you think?
Well, the property has to be purchased, does it not?
It has to be purchased, but that's not $2.5 million. I don't know what that cost is. They're still waiting to find that out. We don't know what it will cost.
But that's gonna be the 2.5% interest right up front is the cost of the land.
Well, as you point out, I mean, we're not gonna be constructing unless it's bought, but I don't want to speak for the town because we don't know what the townspeople want to do yet. It's just, this is a hypothetical scenario that's very favorable to the borrower. And and given the fact that land is so desirable right now and people are hungry to find some that's available to buy, I don't think, as I've said publicly last weekend, that there's any question that we'll be selling the land. That's sort of inconceivable that people wouldn't line up to buy this. So I'm not prognosticating, I'm just saying it as a person who's borrowed money myself, it feels like a very safe scenario to proceed into. That's the way I feel about it.
It's not,
Peter, Betsy?
yes, it's not just the purchase of the land, it's the investment by the town in the infrastructure.
Infrastructure,
Roads,
yeah.
sewer, water,
Right.
stormwater, utility.
And being in the funding group, I can add that we are also seeking to find that money as a gift. That's that infrastructure cost.
Thank you. This is Betsy. I guess I'm just surprised that you say you feel like this is a safe investment or a step forward, because I'm saying, I feel like we need information. We need to know about the stormwater issues. We need to know if we're gonna have to pay for holding ponds as the water comes down the hill so that it doesn't wash out Hudson Avenue again. We need to know that, archaeological study, we need a sound study, we need noise, traffic study, all these things cost money. So before we can do that, I mean, whatever, to get this information, we're gonna have to put out some money. So, you know what I mean? We're jumping in, we have to jump in and then find out later if this is really feasible and this is really, workable on this piece of land.
For clarification, I just want to say, I was saying it's a safe kind of loan. That's all.
That-
I wasn't saying it's
okay.
I can't speak to the safety or the legality or any of the details of the project. I'm just saying, the kind of loan that is available, it feels like a safe kind of loan.
I'm just saying, I don't feel like it's a safe thing for the town to choose to do this right now. Because we have a lot on our plate already, and we really don't know if this particular piece of property could adequately serve the amount of housing that we're anticipating is necessary to pay back the loan, you know? So I feel like that's what I feel like it's.
I don't think you've had an opportunity to speak yet, sir.
That's Jeff.
Hi, my name is Eli Barlow. I agree. I don't think we know that yet, and we're not asking, there's no commitment yet either, right? We're just setting ourselves up to find those things out. The details of the loan, I don't even have the beginning of an understanding of what those would be or how, right? What the structure of the loan would be if all of the lots weren't sold, right? If there were a credit line taken out and then the lots weren't sold within the limit of the credit, no idea what would happen, but I'm sure that before we voted on taking out that line of credit, that information would be available to the people voting.
Steven,
Thanks.
go ahead.
So, I'm trying to ask the question and it just seems like we're going in circles around it and not really getting to it. But if I understand correctly, this line of credit logic is that we put money into it and we sell lots and we get money out of it. And in theory, the balance on that loan isn't going to go very high. But if I understand also correctly, before the project can go forward at all, the land has to be bought. And I understand price hasn't been determined, but it's gonna be something, and at the price of land these days, it ain't gonna be cheap. And then, the next thing it has to have is some infrastructure, some, surveying work or something has to be done in order to lay out the plat and decide where the lots are gonna be, all that is. So the town is gonna have something in it before, money begins coming back in. What I'm trying to get at is a lot of the, and I should say, I haven't decided about this for or against yet. I'm just trying to get enough information so I can be better informed about whether or not I do support it. But once this thing begins, if it doesn't go ahead as planned, if the town's money goes into it, and for whatever reason it's not working, I want to know if the town is going to be on the hook for what it's spent so far and who knows what all else. Or if there's an off ramp to this Ferris wheel that will get the town most of its money back again. That's what I'm trying to find out. And nobody seems to be able to answer that question.
You want to take a crack at that?
Then you have Lauren Geiger on the.
Okay.
Sandy Bitts, would be happy to try to take a crack at that.
From the.
Why not?
From the list.
So,
Lauren Geiger. Just, I know, but it's not on this topic really.
Well,
Yeah.
it's all, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so to be clear, this unsecured loan is going to cover almost all of the costs that I can think of that will be incurred before we get to the point where the cost of construction is known and the cost of the lots is, or the foreseen revenue for the lots is known. So the town with an unsecured loan does not have, at the end of the day, an obligation to pay back that money. The idea is to have a successful project and to pay back the money. But it is an unsecured loan coming up. It hasn't been approved yet. This is the next phase of all the contract documents, all of the survey works, the archaeological study, everything that has to be done to finish permitting. Now, once the project's known, the larger loan kicks in, the one that is secured by the land, the first cost, Doug, you are absolutely right. The first cost on the first day would probably be the land, the 2 lots that we're hoping to get to build this project on. That would be a cost but it would be balanced by the collateral of the land. That is what Princess Rose was talking about. So and then immediately
You're still paying the 2% on the cost of the land.
plus 2%.
Right.
A lot of people with HELOCs, if you have the cash flow issue, you actually pay some of that interest for a short period of time from the loan itself. So that is the situation. 2% of 2 million over a year is $40,000. So, and the land wouldn't be that much of the loan, the line of credit, really. So the idea is that pretty quickly, things get turned around so that lots can be sold after the land is purchased. And then very quickly, that starts to even off. So I hesitate to even make up a number to give an example for the land cost. But let's say in the lot sales, I've been trying to figure out how much those will be worth. And we believe they're worth 2.5 million to sell. So let's say that some percentage, like 50% or 10% or 20% are sold before construction even begins. That would draw down and the total net outlay would never really approach $2 million. So this is all down the road, and I hope I'm explaining this well so that at least people aren't worried about it now. But there will be a lot of opportunities to figure out how the loan is structured and how it might, the cash flow might work over time, so that there's a solid sense that this is a safe way to move forward before any decision is made. I really hope that that makes sense. Thanks.
Lauren Geiger? You're still muted.
Well, I know she's trying to,
Yeah.
that's why you can see her finger.
Yeah.
Can you unmute her on this end?
Okay,
Maybe.
I think I got it. Can you hear
You
me?
do. Yes.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to let people know, if this hasn't been said, I'm sorry I missed part of the meeting because of my lack of service on the train. But I wanted to let people know that there is a series of frequently asked questions on our website, and I really encourage you to look at it. And if people want more information, I actually have a Word document that I prepared that answers 42 questions about the project. I think it's pretty thorough, and it addresses some of the things that I've heard tonight. The other thing I wanted to say is that in terms of the wastewater and the water department, I understand that they have said that they could accommodate this extra number of houses, even if Goddard is at full capacity. They actually said it would be a benefit to the water department because of some issue with flow. The other thing I wanted to say is that the Vermont Community Foundation, many of you may not be familiar with it, but it is a philanthropic organization with a mission to help Vermonters. And the land will be collateral for the loan. And we also have a Google form for those who are interested in purchasing lots. We have more than 27 people signed up, and we have interest from Down Street Housing and Habitat for Humanity in purchasing lots. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you very much.
Dan?
Yeah, I was just gonna read, I don't know if it was Gary or Chris, I don't know who of the listers wrote this, but a clarification about the tax year. The tax year begins April 1st. Finalized grand list for 2025 will not be out until early June. I said April 1st earlier, pending the grievance hearings. Once the grievance hearings are held, the finalized grand list will be determined and property values will be set for 2025. The grand list will be used to determine tax rates, and the individual property tax bills will be sent out in July as usual. The Goddard property still needs to be inspected for cost/valuation purposes as part of the townwide reevaluation, since it has been treated as a nonprofit in the past, non-taxable. So there are no answers on Goddard and its value yet.
Paula?
Keeping it short, but Paula Emery again, I want to just, I feel like we're out ahead. We keep going way out ahead. The vote on town meeting day is to set up a reserve fund, and then the select board will, well, the committee would be required to answer the questions that the select board has asked. And then the select board will deliberate. And either send it to the town or decide.
We're required, if the committee requests or has all the information that we feel comfortable with, then we can request a bond vote, which is required by law to have the entire town vote on it. So we would have to have a special bond vote. That would be what happens. We have a long way to go before that happens, but we want to see this move step by step by step by step. There's still a lot of questions, but a lot of questions have been answered. And I just want to say that this committee and the grant committee and the volunteers in this town that are doing this work are doing it out of the love of this town and because it's really important for this town to have a bigger tax base. I mean, we can't just keep losing houses. We need, and we also need vibrant communities. And our population is aging. The school kids' numbers are going down. This is real. And I would like to see a next generation have a place to live that's a nice community and can be afforded.
Let me ask a
That's
question. If I'm understanding this, we are not a go stop until that bond vote that Carl just talked about. So, I mean, to my own thinking, I don't know why we wouldn't go ahead up until that bond vote. That's when all the questions need to be answered, where there can't be any unanswered questions. And when it's time for the bond vote. Yeah, sorry.
You got Eli and then Stephen.
Yeah, and I don't know, I find myself getting defensive, right? As soon as I take the mic away, I'm like, why was I talking like that, right? But I think, right, it feels like folks who are asking perfectly reasonable questions get treated as if they're against the project. And folks who are saying, we don't have an answer to those questions right now are treated as if the town is taking a risk that isn't worth it. And we're just saying, we don't know. The analogy of an off-ramp is a great, like, that clicks in my mind, right? We want that. I hope that we can assure you that this can be done safely by the time that we're asking you to commit to it. And if we can't, then vote no. Yeah, thanks.
It may be true that we need that it's not a stop go or until the bond vote. But you don't want people asking all those questions on the day we're making that decision. Those questions need to be answered before then. I think you.
That'll happen.
Otherwise, the bond vote will lose.
Right.
That'll happen.
And,
I mean,
you know, I've been in plenty of volunteer efforts in my life, and I know what it's like to put a hell of a lot of work into something and then have it get shot down or have to fight like hell to keep it alive. So I sympathize with the organizers. I'm just trying to get it through my head how this is going to work and what are the stopgap measures and, you know, that sort of thing. There's a lot of folks in this town that are really nervous about this. And if we don't allay their fears, they ain't going anywhere.
they should start with those 42 questions that Lauren talked about.
I was also going to suggest, and maybe it's on the website, I should probably look at it, but when you start talking about all this money is coming in to fund some of the work that's all granted or whatever, apparently the town hasn't invested a dime, hasn't borrowed anything. It'd be nice to see kind of a graphical representation of that shows, you know, I don't know, pie charts, flow charts, something or other, what's going in, what's going out. So we can have a pictorial representation of it and know what it actually looks like.
Folks, go ahead, Betsy.
or whoever, who's paying for the archaeological study? How are we paying for that?
Go ahead.
You don't have to get up.
See, okay.
The camera's right there.
I feel better standing when I talk. I guess I was always trained that way. Okay.
I mean, who's paying for the archaeological study? Who's paying for the wastewater study and for the, you know, the groundwater study? Who's doing the sound, the noise, the traffic study?
Traffic study,
Who's
that
paying for all?
that is all under the umbrella of phase 2 engineering services, so
And
I
who's paying for
totally
that?
agree.
Who's paying for that?
Betsy, you gotta stop asking questions while she's speaking.
Here, do you want to finish? Right, finish your.
I am confused as to if we already, or are we getting that money out of the first loan that we received at no cost? Are we getting it out of the second loan that you just referred to, which is unsecured, and then we'll pay back? If we use it, if we use it and we don't go forward, what happens?
No, these are really good questions. So, and I think Steve is right. I began to envision a chart, just as you said the word chart. I think that would help everybody to have just a graphic showing about how this will work. So to answer the question, the costs to date have been covered by that first grant from the Community Foundation. We're kind of getting to a stopping point. Work will stop by March 8th as we get the cost estimate for schematic phase design. And then there's really 2 critical points coming up. One would be the day of a bond vote, and it's actually going to be approving 2 bonds. One is the unsecured bond and one is the secured bond. So on that day, whenever it happens, there will be a big decision with a lot of information available.
2 bond votes?
Well, it's 2 bonds. I don't know how you folks structure it, but it would be the unsecured bond vote and then the secured one. So,
This is the first I'm hearing of
Okay.
two bond
well,
votes.
I might be wrong and Arian may have to jump in and correct me. Maybe they're part A and B of the same thing.
Well,
I don't know how loans work. I'm not a banker.
that may create more questions than it has.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
we're gonna have more
So-
discussions
so
about
bond-
this.
Right, there's a point of a bond vote, but this unsecured loan covers us through the point
Mhm.
where you have all the information to make the second really big decision, which is the go stop.
Mhm.
And then by then you have all the information you need, and that would trigger the use of this secured. loan.
So, Sandy, am I right in saying, and this I think is the most direct answer to your question, Betsy? There's an unsecured loan. Right, so nothing
Coming up.
coming up, $150,000 approximately.
Yes,
And that would cover all of the engineering things that you're talking about.
yes, correct,
That is how it would be paid for.
yes.
If,
When is
if
that
the
coming
town,
up?
if the town decided to take that on, and I don't know that it's been presented to us fully yet, so I don't think there's an answer, because they have to be presented to us, then we have to just talk about it as a select board.
And the letter has just been written, like, very, very recently about offering Plainfield this unsecured loan. So
So that's new information.
it is completely new.
Okay.
And part of my request at the last select board meeting was for us to take a meeting off of talking about the village expansion at every select board meeting, was that we did not get that update because they were taking a meeting off from.
So it's being offered as a way through this time where more work has to be done to get all of the questions answered and get all the permitting complete. But we still don't know for sure whether it makes sense for the town of Plainfield to press the go button and then buy land and start construction and sell lots. Okay.
Michael.
Yeah.
Michael Billington. I sit as,
gotta
as I think I should, on the funding committee as well as the expansion committee to try and keep track of what's going on. And I know how important, and there's a lot of moving parts of this. But the part that maybe isn't mentioned enough, but I try to say this as often as we have a meeting about it. There are people waiting to give us money. It's not just the loans, there are people waiting to give us money. There are religious, faith-based organizations wanting to help the building process, who are waiting patiently for us to go through this, however many months it takes for the townspeople to decide. We're not only suggesting that they're going to be buying lots, which basically is an initial investment that will be in hand, but also to build homes for people at very low cost, some things that would not happen if we were in fact in the hands of a private developer instead of doing this. But the other part is, we're also, as it was announced by Karen Hatcher at the last select board meeting, was we have been put in a special list by the state of Vermont for a $5 million community development block grant. This money would normally be competed for, but the state has actually decided that the Plainfield is so important and our situation is so difficult that rather than have us compete for a $40 million pool, that they're actually setting aside $5 million of what could be as much as $10 million, but the $5 million is going to be put guaranteed to Plainfield so that we in fact can deal with things like the infrastructure planning, things that have to do with walkability, things that have to do with studies, things that have to do with street lighting and sidewalks, and a lot of the things you mentioned, Betsy, in terms of making the town more livable. All of these people are so on our side. They want us to succeed and they want us to recover and they want us to be a stronger and more sustainable town at the end of this process, however many years it takes.
Folks, I feel like the hour is getting late. I think we've been around in a circle. I will not cut off the meeting, but I would like to suggest that since it's an informal meeting, that soon somebody suggest an adjournment.
So you did jinx it by saying it was gonna be quick.
I've made other mistakes, sir.
Yeah.
Betsy, would you like the last word?
Yes, we have this unsecured loan.
We don't have enough.
We don't have anything yet.
We are about to get
Well, we have, no, the select board still has to discuss it.
I thought I heard you say that there is a unsecured loan coming soon, possibly.
Being offered to
Being
us.
offered to us. It would cover engineering studies, et cetera, et cetera. What do we do if we turn this down? Who pays that loan back?
Well, we don't, no one would turn down the loan.
Well, we spent the money. We've spent the money. We had the engineering studies. Who pays those
Oh, if
people?
you decide not to go forward.
Yes, who pays those people?
So
Who are the people? What's the organization that's offering the loan?
Yes.
the organization is the Vermont Community Fund, a foundation, excuse me, and they believe in Plainfield and they believe that the project will go forward. And so the idea is that will not, the issue of that it's not unsecured will not become a problem because the project will go forward. So if it doesn't go forward, it has been explained to me that they have other ways to recover the funds. They would, of course, rather not do that. They would rather the project be successful. But they are being incredibly generous to make this offer of an unsecured loan. So that Plainfield is not left on the hook if the project can't move forward. Did I not answer?
Are you raising your hand to adjourn, Stephen?
Yeah,
I'm trying so
honestly,
hard to
we might lose select board quorum and this meeting might have to end anyway. Cause I have to go home.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Francis Rose is still on, but I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I just wanted to ask,
I don't think you called on it, right?
I just wanted
I
to,
have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Stephen, and then the.
I just want to ask if it's an unsecured loan and we're not really on the hook to pay it and we default on it, does that affect the town of Plainfield's credit rating?
We don't know because we haven't discussed it yet.
We haven't even had a.
We haven't had a single
You
conversation
don't even
about the
know about
loan.
it yet.
There's an informal motion to adjourn. Is there an informal
Just
vote to
certified.
adjourn? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? I don't want to hear it.